I don't know when you started staying with me. That's the truth, not the polished version. Not the version people expect from a man who has learned how to smile while carrying things he never speaks about. I mean the real truth. The uncomfortable one. The kind that arrives in the middle of the night when the house is quiet and there is nowhere left to hide. Have you ever noticed how some people leave, but somehow never leave? Their voice fades. The conversations end. Days pass, weeks pass, life keeps moving. And yet something remains. A feeling, a warmth, a presence that lingers in ordinary places, in empty rooms, in unfinished thoughts, in moments that were never supposed to matter. I spent a long time convincing myself that I was fine, that attachment was temporary, that loneliness was easier than disappointment. But then I started finding traces of you in the silence I had spent years building around myself, and that frightened me more than I can explain. Because what if the person I was trying not to miss had already become part of me? Stay with me for a moment. I think there is something hidden inside this feeling, something neither of us may fully understand yet. I am tired in ways that don't show on the surface, not the kind of tired sleep can fix. The kind that settles into a man after years of carrying things alone. I am older now, not just in age, in disappointments, in goodbyes, in the quiet habit of expecting less than my heart secretly wants. I almost didn't say this, but I'm speaking to you tonight because something inside me won't let me stay silent anymore. And maybe that's what scares me. The silence used to protect me. Now it keeps leading me back to thoughts of you. The strange thing is that nothing dramatic happened. No grand moment. No unforgettable declaration. Just small things. The kinds of things people overlook. A conversation that lasted longer than expected. A laugh that stayed in my memory after the room emptied. A feeling I couldn't explain. I remember sitting alone in my kitchen one night. The house was quiet. The clock on the wall sounded louder than usual. An unfinished cup of coffee had gone cold beside me. Outside, rain tapped softly against the window. The room carried that familiar loneliness I had known for years. The kind that doesn't arrive suddenly. The kind that settles in slowly until it becomes furniture. I sat there staring at nothing, or maybe staring at everything. Thinking about the day, thinking about work, thinking about all the ordinary things men think about when they're trying not to think about what actually hurts. And somehow I found myself thinking about you. Not intentionally. That is what unsettled me. You appeared in my mind the way certain songs do, without permission, without warning, just there. I told myself it meant nothing. I had spent enough years alone to know how dangerous hope could become. Hope asks questions. Hope opens doors. Hope creates places where disappointment can eventually live. So I pushed the thought away. Or at least I tried. But your presence lingered. Not you, your energy, the feeling of you, the strange comfort that followed after our conversations ended. I never said this then. But I will now. There were nights when the silence felt less heavy because I had spoken to you earlier that day. Even if only briefly, even if nothing important was said. That realization embarrassed me. I wasn't supposed to need that. I wasn't supposed to notice. Men like me become good at surviving without warmth. After enough losses, you learn how to lower expectations. You stop reaching. You stop hoping. You tell yourself independence is strength. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is only loneliness wearing a respectable disguise. I spent years convincing myself I was whole. Years convincing myself I didn't need anyone to sit beside me in the dark. Yet there I was, remembering small details about you that had no logical reason to matter. The way your attention felt genuine. The way you noticed things other people walked past. The way conversations with you seemed to leave behind a softness I wasn't prepared for. I didn't understand it. Part of me wanted to run from it. Part of me wanted to stay there forever. That contradiction exhausted me. I would drive for hours some evenings, no destination, no purpose, just roads unfolding beneath headlights, dark fields, empty intersections, radio playing quietly. The world asleep while I searched for something I couldn't name. And somehow those drives always ended the same way. With me wondering why your memory kept returning. Not dramatically, not obsessively, just steadily, like a light left on in another room. Always there, always visible. The truth is, I had become comfortable with emotional distance. Distance felt safe. Safe from disappointment. Safe from abandonment. Safe from the old ache of watching people leave. Because people do leave. Life teaches that lesson repeatedly. Sometimes gently. Sometimes brutally. A door closes. A phone stops ringing. A message remains unanswered. One day someone is woven into your life. The next day they're a memory trying to survive. Those experiences leave marks. Invisible ones. The kind nobody sees. The kind that influence every decision afterward. I carried those marks longer than I admitted. Maybe that's why your presence affected me. You weren't asking for anything. You weren't demanding walls come down. Yet somehow I felt seen. And being seen can be frightening when you've spent years hiding behind strength. There is something else I need to admit. Something I tried very hard not to acknowledge. The truth is, I started missing you long before I allowed myself to admit it. I was afraid that needing you would expose how lonely I really was. Even writing those words feels uncomfortable, because loneliness becomes easier to manage when nobody knows it's there. You can carry it quietly. You can function, work, smile, succeed, appear fine. But when another person begins to matter, loneliness becomes visible. It steps into the light. And suddenly, all the empty spaces inside you become harder to ignore. I never said this then, but I will now. There were moments I deliberately created distance. Not because I wanted less of you, because I feared wanting more. The difference matters. One comes from absence of feeling. The other comes from fear. And fear has guided more of my life than I care to admit. Fear of loss. Fear of disappointment. Fear that good things never stay. Fear that every beautiful thing eventually becomes a memory. Sometimes I wonder where those fears began. Maybe childhood. Maybe heartbreak. Maybe 100 small wounds gathered over time. I don't know. I only know they were there. Quietly shaping me. Quietly convincing me that solitude was safer than attachment. Then you arrived. Not with noise, not with certainty, just with a presence that lingered longer than expected, long enough to reach places inside me I thought had gone cold forever, long enough to make me imagine things I rarely allowed myself to imagine. A peaceful morning, coffee shared across a table, comfortable silence instead of empty silence, a house that feels lived in, a life that feels witnessed. I never held on to those images for long. They frightened me. But they appeared anyway, softly, briefly, like sunlight through clouds. And maybe that is what remains with me tonight. Not certainty, not answers, just the realization that some people leave fingerprints on your soul without ever intending to. The rain has stopped now. The coffee beside me is still untouched. The room remains quiet, but somehow your absence feels present, like warmth lingering after someone has already walked away. And I don't know what to do with that feeling, so I sit here, listening, remembering, while the empty chair across from me remains empty. I have spent years pretending certain things no longer hurt. Not because the pain disappeared, because speaking about it felt pointless. I am older now, a little worn down, a little quieter than I used to be. There are losses I carry that nobody notices. Some of them still follow me into empty rooms. I almost didn't say this, but I'm speaking to you tonight because something inside me won't let me stay silent anymore. And maybe that is because your presence keeps finding its way into places I thought were permanently closed. There is a lamp in my living room that I leave on most nights. Not because I need the light, because darkness feels larger than it used to. The soft glow fills only one corner of the room. The rest remains hidden in shadows. Sometimes I sit there, long after midnight, the world asleep, the house breathing quietly around me, and I find myself staring at my phone, not expecting anything, not waiting for anything, just holding it, as if it contains something I lost. There were evenings when I would open old conversations, read messages I already knew by heart, not because I was searching for words, because I was searching for a feeling, a trace, a reminder, something that proved you had been real. Funny how attachment works. People imagine it arrives through dramatic moments. I think it arrives through repetition, a voice heard often enough, a kindness repeated enough times, a feeling of safety appearing where none existed before. Then one day you realize the person has become woven into ordinary life. And ordinary life is where the deepest roots grow. I remember one particular night, rain again. It always seems to rain when memory becomes difficult. The windows carried thin streams of water. The air felt cold. The unfinished coffee beside me had already gone stale. I looked around the room and noticed how quiet everything was. Not peaceful, quiet. There is a difference. Peace feels warm. Quiet can feel empty. That night felt empty. And the strange thing was that your absence made the emptiness easier to notice. I never said this then, but I will now. Before you, I had become skilled at living without emotional closeness. Not happy, just accustomed, like someone living in a cold house long enough to stop noticing the temperature. Then warmth appears, even briefly, and suddenly the cold becomes impossible to ignore. That was the problem. You reminded me there were still parts of me capable of feeling, parts I had carefully locked away. Parts I believed were safer untouched. I spent years building those walls, not intentionally, just gradually, one disappointment at a time, one goodbye at a time, one unanswered need at a time. Eventually, the walls became part of who I was. People saw calmness, independence, control. They didn't see the fear underneath. The fear that every connection comes with an expiration date. The fear that affection is temporary. The fear that if I cared too deeply, life would take it away. Again, that fear followed me everywhere, into relationships, into friendships, into quiet moments when nobody else was around. It sat beside me like an old companion, familiar, reliable, unwelcome. And the worst part is that fear often disguises itself as wisdom. It whispers caution. It calls itself realism. It convinces you that protecting your heart is maturity. Sometimes it is only loneliness trying to survive. The truth is, I became very good at leaving emotionally before anyone else could leave first. I told myself I was protecting myself. Maybe I was. Maybe I was also abandoning myself. That is harder to admit. There were moments when I felt myself pulling away from you. Not outwardly, internally. A small retreat. A quiet step backward. Every instinct told me distance was safer. Every instinct told me attachment was dangerous, and still your energy remained. Still your memory found me. In grocery stores, in long drives. In random afternoons when sunlight crossed the floor a certain way, the smallest things carried reminders. A song, a scent, a phrase, a silence. You became connected to pieces of everyday life. Not because I wanted that, because it happened. The truth arrived slowly, and I resisted it for longer than I should have. I kept telling myself I was imagining things, that the comfort I felt around you wasn't real, that the calmness I experienced after hearing from you was temporary. But denial grows tired eventually. Reality keeps waiting, patient, silent, certain. And one night reality finally caught me. I was standing in the kitchen, the refrigerator humming softly, a single light above the sink, cold tiles beneath my feet. Nothing remarkable about the moment, nothing cinematic. Yet I remember it clearly, because that was the moment I understood something. I missed you, not occasionally, not accidentally, genuinely. The realization hit harder than expected. Not because missing someone is unusual, because I had spent so many years convincing myself I no longer needed anyone. That illusion shattered quietly, standing there alone, a middle-aged man staring at a dark window, finally confronting the loneliness he had spent years hiding from. I felt ashamed, not of you, of myself. Ashamed of how deeply isolation had rooted itself inside me. Ashamed of how difficult it had become to admit I wanted connection, wanted closeness, wanted companionship, wanted another heartbeat somewhere nearby. Those desires felt dangerous, as though wanting them guaranteed losing them. I know that sounds irrational. Pain often is. Pain creates strange rules. It teaches lessons that aren't true. It convinces wounded people to expect wounds. And for a long time, I believed it. Then came the hardest confession of all. Not that I missed you, not that I cared, but that part of me had begun imagining a future where your presence remained. Small things, nothing dramatic. Morning coffee, shared silence, a familiar voice in another room. Someone to tell ordinary stories to at the end of an ordinary day. The image would appear unexpectedly, then disappear, like a frightened animal retreating into the woods. Hope never stayed long. Fear always chased it away. Still, those visions returned, again and again, as though some quiet part of me refused to surrender completely. Perhaps that part knew something I didn't. Perhaps souls become tired of surviving without warmth. Perhaps even the most guarded hearts continue searching for home. I don't know. I only know that your presence changed something. Not loudly, not suddenly, just enough. Enough for me to notice the silence differently. Enough for me to recognize my own loneliness. Enough for me to wonder whether life was offering something I had spent years refusing to see. Tonight the lamp still glows beside me. The room remains mostly dark. Outside, the rain has started again. Soft, steady, almost comforting. I sit here listening to it, thinking about all the things I never found words for. And somewhere inside that quiet space, your energy remains. Not gone, not fully here, just lingering, like warmth left behind in a room long after the door has closed. I still wake up some mornings feeling older than I expected. Not physically, something deeper than that. As if parts of me have been carrying winter for too long. I am a man who has spent years learning how to function while feeling empty. Years learning how to keep moving, even when certain rooms inside me remained locked. I almost didn't say this, but I'm speaking to you tonight because something inside me won't let me stay silent anymore. And lately, that silence keeps leading me back to you, not to memories alone, to what your presence uncovered. There is a road outside the city that I drive sometimes when sleep refuses to come. No destination, no plan, just miles of darkness stretching ahead. Street lights appearing and disappearing. The engine humming beneath me, the world reduced to shadows and distant reflections. Those drives have become familiar companions. When the house feels too quiet, when the walls feel too close, when thoughts become heavier than usual, I get in the car and go. For years I believed movement could create distance from loneliness. I know better now. Loneliness travels well. It sits in the passenger's seat, looks out the same window, stays silent the entire time. There was one night when the roads were completely empty. Rainwater reflected the headlights. The sky felt endless. The kind of night that makes a person think about things they spend most days avoiding. And somehow I found myself talking to you. Not literally. You weren't there. But in my mind I was speaking to you, telling you things I had never said aloud, things I wasn't even sure I understood myself. That frightened me, because it revealed something. You had become the person I imagined beside me when I needed someone to understand. Not fix anything, not rescue me, just understand. The older I get, the more I realize how rare that is. People hear words. Very few hear what lives underneath them. Most conversations stay on the surface, polite, safe, forgettable. Then occasionally someone appears who notices the pauses, the hesitation, the sadness hidden between sentences, and somehow you always felt like one of those people. I never said this then, but I will now. There were moments when your kindness hurt, not because it was wrong, because I wasn't used to it. When you've lived with emotional distance long enough, genuine warmth can feel almost unbearable. You don't know what to do with it. Part of you moves closer. Part of you immediately retreats. I lived inside that contradiction every day. One moment wanting connection, the next moment fearing it, one moment imagining trust, the next moment preparing for loss. It was exhausting. But there is something even harder to admit. Something I have hidden from almost everyone. For most of my life, I secretly believed I was easier to leave than to stay for. I know how that sounds. A grown man carrying a belief like that. But wounds don't care about age. They remain where they were created, waiting, influencing everything. There were people I loved who disappeared, people I trusted who walked away, people I thought would remain who became memories. After enough experiences like that, a dangerous idea begins to grow. The idea that departure is inevitable. The idea that everyone eventually leaves. The idea that attachment only delays pain. I carried that belief longer than I should have. Long enough that it became part of my identity. Long enough that I stopped questioning it. And because of that, I developed a habit, a terrible habit. Whenever someone started mattering, I would quietly prepare for their absence. Not consciously, instinctively. As though heartbreak was already scheduled. As though every connection arrived with an invisible expiration date. You never knew that. Nobody did. From the outside, I appeared calm. composed, independent. Inside, I was constantly bracing for impact, constantly expecting loss, constantly rehearsing goodbyes that hadn't happened. The truth is, I started missing you long before I allowed myself to admit it. I was afraid that needing you would expose how lonely I really was. There it is, the sentence I spent so long avoiding, because loneliness wasn't supposed to exist anymore. I had built an entire life around functioning without emotional dependence. I had convinced myself I preferred it, that I was stronger because of it. Then your presence exposed something uncomfortable. Strength and isolation are not the same thing. I wish I had understood that sooner. There were nights when I sat beside the window watching rain slide down the glass, the room illuminated by a single lamp, my coffee growing cold beside me, and I would wonder why your absence felt so present, why the memory of your energy remained after everything else faded, why ordinary moments carried traces of you. A scent, a phrase, a certain kind of silence. You were everywhere and nowhere at the same time, and perhaps that is why I finally stopped fighting it, not because I understood it, because resisting it changed nothing. Some people leave echoes, not loud echoes, gentle ones, the kind that linger in hallways long after footsteps disappear, the kind that remain in a house after laughter fades, the kind that stay with a person during long drives through empty roads. You became one of those echoes. And strangely, that realization began changing me. Very slowly, almost invisibly. I started noticing small things again. Morning sunlight, fresh coffee, music I had stopped listening to, the feeling of looking forward to hearing from someone, tiny shifts. Tiny signs that something frozen inside me might still be capable of thawing. The process scared me. It still does. Hope always scares me. Hope asks vulnerable questions. Hope invites disappointment. Hope requires trust. Yet despite everything, a small part of me continues holding on to it, carefully, quietly, like a fragile object that could break if handled too roughly. Sometimes I imagine a different version of life, nothing dramatic, no grand romance, no perfect ending, just peace. A shared kitchen on a quiet morning, soft conversation, coffee steaming between two people who no longer feel alone. The image never stays long. Fear always arrives. But lately something else arrives too, a sense of longing. Not for excitement, not for escape, for companionship, for home, for the possibility that life may still contain warmth I haven't experienced yet. I don't know what that means. I don't know where it leads. I only know that your energy remains. Even now. The road outside is empty tonight. The rain has finally stopped. The city sleeps. And I sit beside the window listening to the silence, noticing that it feels different than it used to. Not lighter, not heavier, just touched by something I can no longer pretend isn't there. A quiet presence, a familiar feeling, a warmth that refuses to disappear. I don't think I carry sadness the way I used to. It is still here, but it has changed shape, less like a storm, more like weathered stone. Something that has been with me so long it feels woven into the landscape of who I am. I am older now, a little quieter, a little softer in places I once kept guarded. The years have taken things from me. Certainties, illusions, versions of myself I thought would last forever. I almost didn't say this, but I'm speaking to you tonight because something inside me won't let me stay silent anymore. And maybe this is the closest I have come to understanding why. The house is quiet again. It usually is. A dim lamp glows near the corner of the room. The light barely reaches the walls. An untouched cup of coffee rests beside me. Outside, dawn is beginning its slow arrival. The sky is still dark enough to hold the night, but morning is already finding its way in. I have always liked this hour, not because it feels hopeful, because it feels honest. The world has not fully awakened yet. There are no expectations, no performances, no distractions, only for truth. And the truth is that your presence remained with me longer than I expected, much longer. I fought that realization. I argued with it, ignored it, explained it away. Yet every road seemed to lead back to the same place, back to the feeling, back to the quiet imprint you left behind. The strange thing is that I don't remember grand moments. I remember ordinary ones. A conversation that lingered in my thoughts, a message revisited late at night, a feeling of calm I couldn't explain. The way silence seemed less heavy when you existed somewhere within it. That is what stayed. Not drama, not intensity, presence. The older I get, the more I believe that presence may be the rarest gift one person can offer another. Not attention, not admiration. Presence, the feeling that someone genuinely sees you. Not the version presented to the world, not the carefully assembled image. The person underneath, the tired one, the frightened one, the lonely one. The one who still hopes despite having every reason not to. You saw pieces of that man. Maybe not all of him, but enough. Enough that hiding became more difficult. Enough that certain walls no longer felt necessary. Enough that I started wondering whether I had spent too many years surviving and not enough years living. That thought followed me for a long time. Still does. There were mornings when I would wake before sunrise, lie motionless beneath cold sheets, stare at the ceiling, listen to the silence, and imagine what peace might feel like. Not happiness, peace. The difference matters. Happiness comes and goes. Peace stays. At least that is what I hope. And somehow every image of peace contained the same qualities. Warmth, safety, gentleness, connection. Nothing extravagant, nothing dramatic, just the absence of loneliness. For years I believed loneliness was something to conquer. Now I think it is something to understand, something to sit beside, something that teaches us what we truly miss. Mine taught me many things. It taught me how deeply I wanted to be understood, how desperately I wanted somewhere to place my heart without fear, how much of my life had been shaped by old wounds, pretending to be wisdom. Most of all, it taught me this. The heart does not stop longing simply because it has been disappointed. It keeps reaching, quietly, secretly, sometimes against our own wishes. Mine certainly did. Even when I tried to silence it, even when fear insisted attachment was dangerous, even when old memories warned me not to trust hope, the longing remained, small, persistent, human, and eventually it led me back to a difficult truth. I never feared loving someone. I feared losing them. That distinction took years to understand. Love was never the enemy. Love was the thing I secretly wanted all along. Loss was what frightened me. Loss was what made me retreat. Loss was what convinced me to build walls around places that still needed sunlight. You made me see that, not through effort, not through persuasion, simply by existing, by remaining in my thoughts after every logical reason for you to disappear had already passed. There is something almost mysterious about that. Not destiny exactly, not certainty, just a feeling, a quiet familiarity, as though life occasionally places certain souls in our path and leaves the meaning unexplained. Maybe we are not supposed to understand everything. Maybe some things are meant to be felt rather than solved. I have spent enough years searching for explanations. Lately, I find myself valuing presence more, valuing warmth, valuing the rare comfort of feeling less alone. Perhaps that is why your energy still lingers here, not because I hold on to it, because some part of me was changed by it, a subtle change, almost invisible, but real. The loneliness is still here, the uncertainty remains. The future offers no guarantees, yet something softened, something opened, something remembered that connection is not weakness, that needing people is not failure, that affection does not become less meaningful simply because it carries risk. I wish I had learned those lessons sooner, but life rarely teaches us on our preferred schedule. Sometimes understanding arrives after years of silence. Sometimes he begins long after we stop expecting it. Sometimes another person's presence leaves behind a light we continue seeing even after they are gone. Maybe that is what happened. Maybe that is all this is. Or maybe it is something more. I honestly don't know. And for once, I am no longer trying to force an answer. The sky outside is becoming lighter now. Morning slowly unfolding, the room unchanged, the lamp still glowing softly, the coffee untouched, the chair across from me still empty, yet somehow the emptiness feels different than it once did. Not because it disappeared, because it carries a trace of something, a memory, a warmth, a presence. I rest my hand beside the untouched cup, listen to the quiet house, watch the first light of morning enter the room, and there you are again, not physically, not completely gone either, just lingering in the silence, in the stillness, in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Your energy still here, somehow still here.